Ooh.
Ruth. That's
Those are
pretty cool.
dope.
Yeah. I got them apparently I got them at Christmas, but I just picked up the mail. So all season accessory.
So you are 5 weeks late in checking your mailbox. I think I get that you do a lot of email, but I guess there's still real mail that you have to get to once in a while.
Yeah, physical mail. Yeah, it's the mail from California. People sent me mail in California. So
Sarah Aguilar, I see you got an accessory going on. What's going on with you?
Just my favorite sparkly cat ears.
Love it. Donna, I see you. Got some real fancy vibes going. Tell us where that is from.
France.
Ooh.
It was a gift from my husband when he took a trip to France.
Well, that is beautiful. Donna, while I have you unmuted, you had shared a really cool win with a few of our pilot shelters in our call yesterday. Would you mind sharing that same win with everybody on this call?
Yeah, we kind of had a real Haas moment at Palm Valley Animal Society this week. Faith and the team had been working with a group of, or with a family that basically they were, hoarders and had probably about 50 small dogs on property. And they'd contacted us. The son was wanting to get them down to a level that his mother could sustain. And so we were working with them to get them in and work them into one of our rescue partners. And so some of our team went out 2 days ago, I think it was now, and to vaccinate and kind of get them ready for that next level of readiness before we went in and picked them up on the day of transport. And we got there and discovered that the conditions were just really bad. And so instead of leaving them there, we scooped them up. But before we left that property, we pretty much had all but 4 of them placed. And they all left on or they're leaving on transport today. So they barely, got into our shelter at all. And we were able to work with them when they called in to surrender them initially. And it was just through our intake diversion and our pet resource center, we were able to make this happen without taking a ton of resources away from our organization and our partner organizations. And it worked out well. So they're all leaving today.
Amazing, Donna. And it's so,
awesome.
it was so awesome to watch the video of the walkthrough of your organization and just see the kind of courage and tenacity that your staff have working through all of the things. So we're so glad that you're here. So good morning, everyone. It is 8:03 a.m. Pacific Standard Time where I am at. My name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Pilot Director. So honored to be here co-hosting this call with Kristen, Mary, Kim, Shelly, Sharon, and the rest of the Maddie's family. I'm taking a little bit of emceeing away from Kristen today to provide some support just to get the call kicked off. Before we go to Mary, just wanted to give folks an update. We're going to be rejiggering the call a little bit. We're going to be saving our national updates and our resource of the week for the middle of our call. Our amazing first speaker has a hard stop at the middle of the hour, so we're going to get right into that conversation. But as you know, one of my favorite parts of the week is tossing it over to Mary Smith.
Thanks, Bobby. And as I looked around the gallery, I saw my friend Lisa Fernandez, and I just want to remind you all that Lucy gave us a really great rallying cry probably 2 years ago, and that was show up and give a shit. So 2022 considers to be just a suck of a year, and I would say just start thinking about that. So a couple of things I want to remind you all. Last week, we were able to announce the winners of the January grant giveaways to all those folks who are part of this call or watch it on demand. And each month, for those of you who are on this call, just want to remind you all that you need to register each month to be part of the grant giveaway. And to be part of the grant giveaway, you need to actually be attending these calls. So we're just trying to keep those connections strong and wish you all good luck. So speaking of good luck, I have spent the past 2 weeks or so watching the Olympics. I can turn it on late at night and sort of watch that. And I have been just consumed by this thought. And that is, we don't spend enough time understanding and experiencing failures. You know, to be honest with you, no one ever learns from their success, because basically you're just doing the things that you're doing. But when you fail, failure gives you an opportunity to reassess and figure out what else you need to do. And as I watched Michaela Schifrin, who came to the Olympics with these hopes of, I don't know, like a cajillion gold medals. And then her first race, she couldn't finish. Her second race, she couldn't finish. And as she sat there for 25 minutes, as all of her teammates were, skiing past her, all she could think about were all the people she had let down. Like, this woman was so prepared for success. There was no way she could handle failure. She couldn't figure out how to reset from that. And I think we really need to go out there and do something and fail at it and feel good about failing at it and celebrate the fact that maybe we aren't perfect, that maybe we don't get it 100% of the time, that maybe it's not a win. The race that she was able to finish, she came in 9th. Maybe coming in 9th is really where we should be. How the hell do we know if we don't try? So I would think that we all need to give each other a break, and we need to give ourselves a break. And sometimes the break is that we're not always going to be the best that we can be. We're not always going to succeed. Sometimes we're going to fail, and who gives a fuck? Just pick yourself up and keep moving forward. I'm out. Thanks, Bobby. Thanks, Kristen.
I'm going to just sit with that for a second, Mary Smith, because I think you're absolutely right. I think we are incredibly hard on ourselves, and we are our biggest critics. And I just want to slow down and give the other 196 people on here some love and appreciation, because the one thing that I know, no matter how hard your work is, y'all keep showing up. And I know it's not because of my bad jokes, it's because y'all love what you do. So I appreciate that. Kristen Hassan, I'm going to come over to you to introduce our first amazing speaker.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you and love seeing all your fun accessories. If you did wear a fun accessory today, please show us on camera. We love to see your faces whenever we can. And just a reminder, we usually start these calls a little bit early. And so if you want to come and just chat with your peers, it's okay to come. I think 10, 15 minutes early, I believe the calls start. I usually get here about 10 minutes before, and there's a lively discussion happening. We're going to go to our first speaker today, and we asked him to come back. You all may remember Dr. Weiss. He came and talked to us about COVID in animals, and there's been some new news coming out. Particularly, there was a New York Times headline that if you didn't really dig into the story, you might freak out next time you see a deer, because the story sort of indicated that deer could be COVID lurking in our backyard. So he's here to tell us sort of what are the latest updates around wildlife and COVID, animals and COVID, and what other things we have learned since last time he was here. So Dr. Weiss, welcome to the call.
Great. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I don't have a lot prepared. More of this is just to answer any questions that you have. I'll give an update in the deer situation because that's what you asked me to come. And you said the interest was about, but we can kind of open it up to questions after that. So essentially, there's not a lot of surprise here, to be honest. We know that this is a human virus because it really likes people, but it can still infect a lot of other species. And we're still finding different species. And a lot of the way we find out is, just natural bad luck where we infect it. Like, we're doing a really good job of spreading this person to person. And we're also doing a really good job spilling it into animals. And then we don't really know what happens. Like, for our domestic pets, the bigger implications are probably pretty slim in terms of them being a problem down the road. Wildlife have always been a concern because what we're worried about with this virus is creating new reservoirs and creating new places where variants can emerge. Like, right now, it's probably not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. We're worried about, spillover in animals at the very start when we're trying to contain this, and we missed the boat there. And now we're worried about them as things will ultimately wane. Like, right now, you're much, much, much more likely to get infected from a person than from a deer or cat or anything else. But there will hopefully be a point where you get less and less likely to be exposed from a person. And if we have it circulating in animals, then that relative risk from the animal comes up. So maybe our biggest population of infected individuals internationally becomes wildlife. And that's the scenario that would cause a concern. If we control it well in people, but we have a reservoir in animals. The other thing that goes along with that is the variants, and we all know about variants now. We've gone to from we have Alpha, we got Delta, and we got Omicron, and we've got Omicron's relative BA2 right now. And these variants can be problems because they can be more transmissible, sometimes more severe, various things. And variants happen when the virus just replicates. So the more the virus, transmits through people or animals, the more it just has these random mutations. And sometimes these random mutations are bad for us. They make it easier to spread or make it more severe or refractory to some of our treatments. And anytime it's spreading wildly, we have a recipe for mutations to happen, variants to occur. And right now that's happening in people because we're spreading it widely. But animals bring in a different dynamic, because if it gets into animals where it can spread widely, then we get the potential for a deer variant, or we've seen a mink variant where people infected mink on mink farms in Europe. It's changed on the mink farm, then it went back into people, and then it spread in the community. And that one didn't end up being a big deal. It wasn't that bad of a strain. So what we know right now is we can infect deer. We're doing a pretty good job of it. Deer are really susceptible. And the concern about deer is just we have a lot of them, and we do have contact with them. If we think about something like a wild cat, so if a mountain lion got infected from a person somehow, it's probably not a big deal in the grand scheme, because we're only infectious for a short period of time. So if you get infected with this virus, there are a few day window when you're a risk to others. So you have to find someone else to infect, and they find someone else, and we propagate this. And the same thing applies in animals. So if you've got a solitary species like a wild cat, they're unlikely to see another cat. It's going to see another cat. It's going to see another cat, and it's going to die out. Something happened. I hope you can hear me there. But if we've got a deer where we got lots of deer, or they're fairly gregarious and they move around, we've got the potential for this circulating. So that's kind of the long-winded introduction, but we know right now that we can find this virus in deer populations in various areas in the US and in Canada. And sometimes in really high numbers. A large percentage of these deer have evidence of being infected previously or actually actively infected right now. And we don't know what that means. So the good news is that we're finding current strains. So there's a report just last week about Omicron in deer in Long Island. And, that freaks some people out. But for me, in some ways, that's a good news story, because I don't mind finding Omicron in the deer, because I know we're infecting deer. And I expect to see strains that we're spreading around right now. I would be concerned if we saw Alpha in deer, or an older strain, right? Because if we saw Alpha in deer, that's not circulating in people right now. So if we find a deer with Alpha right now, it means it's been hiding out somewhere for the last almost a year and maybe circulating around in deer. The other thing we're worried about is if we find a weird strain. So if you look at the strains we find in deer, they really match nicely with the strains that are in people in that area. If that starts to diverge, like we start finding Omicron that's really different than any Omicron we're finding in people, then that supports that this virus is staying in deer and it's circulating around and it's changing over time. And that creates the specter that maybe we get into a situation like we have with flu, for example. Very different virus, very different dynamics, but we know the reservoir for these different flu strains is in wildlife. And we just don't want that happening in deer. So really the only way to figure this out is time. Like, we don't know what happens to it. Ideally what happens is we infect deer, and then they pass it amongst themselves for a little while, but then it burns out because they don't keep finding new deer to infect. So it spreads for maybe a few weeks, a couple months, whatever, and it dies out. As opposed to perpetually circulating. And the only way we figure that out is just by looking over time. So we can't give anyone an answer right now. All we can say is we're spreading it to them. They're spreading it around nicely. Potentially they're spreading it to other wildlife. Potentially they're a bridge into other animals like cats that can interact with them and are susceptible. But we're at step 2 of 10 to really understand what's going on. So it's just one more example of the wildlife link and why we need to control this in people, and why we need to limit contact of people with wildlife, especially if they're sick. But in general, it's people that are hand feeding deer, having deer come up to their property. It's that close contact that maybe poses the greatest risk to deer. The other potential route that I kind of think about is cats. So indoor, outdoor cats. So, if I'm affected and my cat goes outside, he interacts with a deer, which we see cats interacting with deer. Maybe cats are a bridge there too. Just another reason to be thinking about our domestic pets and not infecting them. And if we do expose them, don't let them meet other people or other animals. So I'll see if I don't know if anyone's been keeping an eye on the questions. There are a bunch of
the cat rodent connection. And I know you've written about this recently. Can you talk a little bit about are rodents a threat to cats? How is this traveling in that chain?
Yeah, we don't know. We know cats are susceptible, and we know cats quite often get infected. Actually, with our work, it's the majority, slight majority of cats in households where there's COVID in a person will get infected, and they usually burn it off pretty quickly. They shed for a little bit. Could they then infect a rodent? And that's what, again, it's a concern. And that's why we want to keep cats of infected households inside, so they're not interacting with other cats, getting into community cat colonies, getting into rodents or other susceptible wildlife, because we just don't know. Like most often when the cat encounters a rodent, the rodent's not going to come away from that very well. But sometimes they do escape, obviously. And then there's the other side. Could rodents be a bridge into the household via cats? We don't know that. We know some rodents are susceptible to the virus. And this is, again, the concern about it getting out there in the wild. Because right now, like the risk of your average mouse that an indoor-outdoor cat might encounter or a community cat might encounter being infected is going to be really low, you would think, because we just don't have evidence that's established in a lot of these wild populations besides deer. But if it does over time, or if it's just happening, we don't know, then that could be an issue, right? If it's circulating around, you got lots of mice, they interact really well, they got new mice all the time, so you're getting new susceptible ones. If you build up this virus in mice, then maybe your indoor-outdoor cat could be a bridge for the person. They tangle with a mouse, they get infected from eating the mouse, and then they bring that inside. So we don't know. This is all kind of really theoretical stuff. But again, this is why we pay attention, because we don't know. And we've been trying to get people to say, okay, let's not be stupid about it, but let's actually assume there's some degree of risk and pay attention to it, as opposed to waiting and saying, oops, we missed the boat. Now we need to do something, or we've missed our opportunity to intervene. So it's just the common sense stuff. Like a lot of this stuff is just common sense, right? Let's keep infected people away from animals. Let's keep exposed animals away from other animals and other people. Let's not interact with wildlife, because we just don't know that dynamic. I see this question about wastewater there too, and it's a great question. This would be as a source of infection of deer. It's one of the ones that's probably number 3 on the list of potential things after humans and other animals. We use wastewater for surveillance, so we look for the virus to tell us as a good proxy. We use it at our university here. We do wastewater sampling of all the residences, so we can know what's going on in the students without having to sample students. But though we can detect the virus with PCR, we don't think or necessarily know there's live virus there. So we know there'll be viral remnants, like bits of the virus's genetic makeup, and that's what we detect with PCR testing. We don't have evidence there's actually live infectious virus. So wastewater plants probably aren't the issue, just based on the virus dying throughout the process. People defecating in the bush if they're hunting, theoretically, for sure. That seems like a tough way to infect the number of deer that we're seeing infected, but certainly, waste has a potential, but it's gonna be lower on the list. I see the question, dogs or nose. I'll look at some of the questions, but if I'm missing some, or you see some that are kind of more relevant, jump in, or if someone wants to just ask. So I see dogs are nose to nose in the fence with deer weekly. Should I be concerned? I think aware. Dogs are lower risk for infection than cats for sure. And we don't know if dogs are infectious. So we know that if we look at households where people have COVID, we can find it in dogs periodically. And 30-40% will get infected, but it's usually a really low grade infection. Rarely do they get sick or at least they're seriously ill. And it's probably pretty uncommon for them to have enough virus that they can infect someone. But we don't know. I'd have to say there's a theoretical risk. If you have COVID in deer in your area, they can infect your dog and your dog can bring in the house. The risk isn't zero. The risk is gonna be really, really low, but it's not zero. And then there's the other way. This is how it might get into deer, right? So if you're infected and your dog's having that type of contact with the fence line, if your dog has enough virus to be infectious, that's how we could bridge it. So it's more like with a cat, just because they're more infectious. But these are the types of encounters that we just don't pay a lot of attention to. We don't really have good data on how we contact a lot of wildlife. We assume that it happens periodically. We really don't know the frequency and things that impact that. So, ideally we would have less contact of deer with dogs, and cats with deer, but it's tough to do. Like there are things you can do, put automatic lights up so the deer get scared off at night, but there's always going to be some risk of a bridge.
Do you can I ask one question? So do you think that when we're looking at the existing variants, you touched a little bit on different variants. I know people like you don't love speculative questions, but in 2022, do you think we're going to see additional variants coming out?
Oh, there's no doubt we're seeing them now. So we've got BA2, which is a variant of Omicron. It's thought to be about 1.5 times more infectious than Omicron, which we weren't sure could happen. We thought Omicron was maybe as good as you can get, quite honestly. So it's more infectious. We don't know if it's more severe. So right now we're just starting to see it take over. In the US, it's accounting for maybe 2% of infections based on surveillance. US surveillance isn't great. There's not enough of it. So it's sporadic, but it's starting to get a foothold. If we look at Denmark, Denmark withdrew a lot of their restrictions about 2 weeks ago, and they've seen a big upsurge in cases and hospitalizations and deaths. And they're seeing a surge in BA2. And we don't know if that surge is because of this variant, or if that surge just happened because it's the variant that was there when they backed off on some of their restrictions. So we haven't really sorted that out. So we're going to get two things that can happen when it comes to the variants. One is just the evolution. So we got Omicron that became, Omicron's close friend. There's a little bit of drift over time. The other concern is the variant that comes out of nowhere, like Omicron did. And where Omicron came from, we don't know. The best guess is it came from an area where there's widespread transmission and no surveillance. So a country in sub-Saharan Africa where there's a lot of spread and there just wasn't good genomic surveillance. And then it got into South Africa where they have really good surveillance and they found this strain. But a variant could emerge anywhere you've got a lot of transmission. And that includes the US. You still got a lot of transmissions. We can see a variant emerging anywhere. It's just random dumb luck, whether it's a bad one. So we're going to see more variants. The question is, will you get to the point where the new variants can't be all that much worse? Omicron is harder to vaccinate against for infection. So when we see by 8 months after your second dose, you have very little protection against Omicron. By your third dose, it shoots up, which is again the importance of getting a third dose. But we do see a big difference. Delta, we protect much better against Delta than we do Omicron. So that's a concern over time. If our vaccines become less effective, still the vaccines are exceptionally good against severe disease for Omicron. So we've got that thing there. But there's no doubt we're going to see more variants. The question is, are we going to see something that happens like Delta? We had a big wave from Delta. Omicron, we had a big wave from Omicron. Do we risk that again? Or every time we get one of these big waves, do we build up enough protection from the virus in general that the next variant can't do quite as much? And we don't know. So, the last summer I said, I was saying last summer, if we finished our third wave, we're expecting a bit of an early wave in September, just with everyone mixing, and that's probably the end. And I was wrong there, because we had Delta that came along, and then we had Omicron that came along. So I don't think you'll find anyone that's going to be comfortable making a prediction. I would assume that we're going to see little wavelets. I'm hoping we don't see a big one, but that's a guess. Until we vaccinate the world, we're going to be at risk for a new variant. That's really the take home. Until we vaccinate the world, and until we get countries that have access to vaccines that people can actually get people vaccinated, we're not going to have control of this virus, because we have to be able to control spread to be able to control variants.
This is probably a really stupid question, but will we be vaccinating animals against this?
Well, we can, and we are right now to a certain degree. It comes down to what's the value. So there are a couple of vaccines right now. Zoetis has a vaccine in North America. There's Finland has their own mink vaccine, and Russia has Carnivac, which they've licensed for a bunch of different carnivores. And we know basically nothing about that vaccine. So think about what we vaccinate against, right? So with these vaccines, largely you're vaccinating to protect against severe disease. They're probably not going to be as effective for preventing transmission. So if we're thinking about when we would vaccinate, so we can think about a few different scenarios. One is to prevent severe disease in the animal. And we just don't see much in dogs and cats. Most of our species, right? Dogs in particular, cats even that we don't see a lot of moderate disease, even let alone severe disease. So the cost benefit probably isn't there. It's good having the vaccine in case that changes with a new strain, but the morbidity from vaccination would probably be greater than what you would prevent. The exception is like wild cat, like the big cats. Zoo cats seem to die more often. Like we've got enough reports of big cats dying, and the implications of that too with some of the conservation sides. So a lot of zoos are vaccinating all their big cats and they're non-human primates, because the non-human primates, the gorillas, are like us. They're quite susceptible. So we vaccinate against in situations where there might be severe disease. So that's some of our zoo animals. We can also vaccinate in situations where we've got a greater risk of it spreading back into people. And really that's mink, because we don't want transmission on mink farms, because that leads into risks for exposure of animals on the farm and exposure of people and creation of variants. Even though the vaccine may not control spread a lot, it's probably going to help a little bit. So in the US, it's being used on some mink farms. In Canada, we've got access to it. I'm not sure how many have actually used it yet, but so that's the main situation where you've got large groups of animals outside of zoos. And like I said before, my line on vaccines for dogs, cats, ferrets is it's nice they're available in case something goes wrong, but I wouldn't vaccinate my cat right now because just I don't see the value. Like I've got a couple cats and I got a dog, and the odds of them having severe disease are really, really slim. And every vaccine, I'm very, very much, if I need to vaccinate, I'll vaccinate, but there's always some degree of risk, right? So if I think the protection of a vaccine is a 1 in a million, I'm probably not going to put the time, effort, money, and adverse event risk into vaccinating.
Thank you so much. Okay, so it looks like I think the only question we didn't get to is Dr. Livy asked about farmed deer, and I guess this relates to other versus wildlife, and if those two populations interacting is a cause of spread.
Yeah, we don't know, and probably not the big cause. It certainly can help. So if you look at the US data, so the stuff from the fall and summer in the US, we're finding it in deer in multiple states and lots of different areas. And there didn't seem to be any link, as far as I've heard anecdotally, to areas where there are farm deer. It's just a deer thing. Certainly farm deer, again, are another potential bridge, depending how they're farmed. Now, a lot of the farm deer have pretty clear restrictions on what they do with double fencing and the like, so they can't get close to wild deer. But yeah, anytime we have close contact, and actually it showed, I think some of the US data showed that the farm deer, because they did study some farm deer at the same time, had a lower infection rate than the wild deer, which maybe just relates to the biosecurity on the farm deer. So certainly anytime that we create more human animal contacts or more human to animal to other animal contacts, we create some risk. So farm deer certainly are something that we pay attention to. And in Canada, we've done a rapid risk assessment on kind of different aspects of spreading it to deer, but they're probably not the cause. They might contribute for sure. And it depends on how they run them, because some farm deer operations move deer around between places, and that's another way to spread it. So, and if an operation, if they have escapees, that's a potential issue. So if it's a really well-run operation and they're double fenced and everything, the risk is probably very low. The more a chance of their deer encountering another deer, the risk goes up. And then there's that wildlife bridge we don't know. So if you got a farm deer and you have no breakdown, a group of farm deer, and they're really well contained, it doesn't necessarily mean there's no risk, because maybe a mouse or maybe a cat or something could bridge it. It just means the risk drops. So again, we don't know, because there's not been a lot of study of farm deer, but they certainly are susceptible, but I don't think they're driving this.
Dr. Weiss, as articles like this pop up and community members are reaching out to shelters really looking for information and clarity, what do you think are some good resources that shelters could share with the public related to just COVID and pets or animals?
Yeah, well, I guess I'm biased to mine. I think some of them are linked to my website in here. So I've got the Worms and Germs blogs. It's a non-commercial site. It costs me money to run it, so I don't mind plugging it a little bit. We have various things there. CDC has some information that's pretty good. CDC really took a long time to even want to address the issue. I think they're trying just to hope not to raise concern. They eventually, they started off saying there's no evidence of this, that, and the other thing, and then they finally came around to it saying, yeah, we need to address it. Maybe that's some good stuff there now. The Public Health Agency Canada also has some pretty good stuff. We have a federal, provincial, territorial working group that's been on this for a while, so that's another way to find some good general overview. I think trying to think what else is up. The various groups have little things. It's trying to find something that's kind of at the lay level and up to date is maybe a challenge, and that's where I'm biased. My website's maybe as good as that because we keep updating as things go through. So, but the CDC has really good information too. And good thing about CDC is, it's a well-known, reputable group, so that would be a good place to go. If people are looking at wildlife, there are certain wildlife organizations that have that. I don't know the US ones as well. In Canada, we have a couple. We've got some guidance that's out there for wildlife rehabbers or for shelters that are taking in wildlife. And that brings in a different dynamic. If someone might be bringing in various wildlife species, we've got the issue of that wild animal, and then we've got the issue of that wild animal and other species that are there. So there is some guidance around that in a couple different places. And people can email me too. I'll put my email in here if anyone doesn't have it.
We all just want you to know how grateful we are for Worms and Germs. Like, it is truly such a wonderful resource to share. It's really accessible for people. You break it down. Thank you, because it really is a public service, and we all,
it's good to know
everybody, just when we say thank you.
So my email's in there. Don't be afraid to email. If you're emailing me about like a pressing issue, you got an exposure in a shelter or something, or other infectious disease that are really timely things, put urgent in the title. Like you get a crap load of emails and sometimes I have to prioritize. So if it says urgent, I try to get all the clinical stuff and all the COVID stuff done right away. So that'll draw me to it. But yeah, don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions or any follow-up on this stuff. I see there's a question about mule deer. I haven't seen it in mule deer. We haven't got a lot of surveillance of mule deer. It's basically white-tailed deer is all we have right now, as far as I've seen. I don't think I've seen any. We've been looking into that, and there's some work being done in caribou, will be done in caribou in Canada soon, because that's just another one of our species, and elk, any of the service. Like the deer are the bigger concern right now, just because the white-tailed deer are very numerous and they live in close proximity to people. You know, our caribou are a lot more remote. But they're potentially a bridge to a lot of different species we know nothing about. So they're, and I imagine you're seeing surveillance in different places in the US as well. I haven't heard what other surveillance is going on in the US lately, but I see another question, deer, and shut me up if I'm out of time. Question about deer to livestock. Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Once it gets into an animal species, it can go wherever. The good thing for us so far is livestock aren't susceptible, or at least aren't relevant. If we look at cattle and pigs, you can affect them kind of experimentally. They won't get sick. The odd one, you can find a little bit of virus somewhere in them, and they're not shedding the virus. So they're really a non-entity, which was a concern. Pigs were a concern at the start of this because we thought they might be susceptible. Now we have to reset every time we get a new variant. And what we're hoping is that we don't get a new variant that is able to infect pigs or cattle, because that opens up a whole new range of issues, you know, with concerns about food and environmental contamination and more animals and everything else. But yeah, deer are another way that could bridge it into livestock if we get a variant that's livestock susceptible. And again, the reason we don't want it in deer in the wild, because it circulates in deer in the wild, deer and cattle. If you get that strain that can ultimately move into cattle, you know, that you might not find out until you start finding it in cattle. You don't realize what's going on in the deer.
Thank you so much. I think we are gonna move on now. And I know we could probably fill the whole hour with this. Dr. Weiss, thank you so much for coming and being here and being a voice of science and reason during this moment. I don't know about you, Mary, but it feels almost surreal that we've gone from talking about can cats and dogs get COVID and could they be at risk of being cold if they do get COVID, to now today talking about the many species that are carrying COVID among us. It's really been a intense couple of years. And so thank you for being here, Dr. Weiss.
Great, anytime. It's good talking to you.
We're going to move on to our national partner update. So if you are here with the national organization, you have something going on you'd like to share with the 230 something folks on the call, please jump in now.
230, Kristen. Man, it's a lot of people. I'm Spencer Conover. I work for Pasco County Animal Services in Tampa, Florida, but I also represent the National Animal Care and Control Association. Got my Accessory Friday right behind me. But I didn't know it was Accessory Friday, Bobby, but I always come prepared, you know. A couple of updates from NACA. We had a great board meeting this week yesterday. Announced a couple of great things that are going on as far as timelines for our upcoming awards, our upcoming elections. So make sure to keep an eye on our website for announcements about that. NACA is seeking this year, we're hoping to expand our image library. One of the best things we get feedback about is great officers doing the work in the field and being able to share the great work that they do with everybody. And so if you or your team, anybody on your team is doing amazing things, or if you would like to be featured by NACA, please email any photos, any images, any stories to Jerica Owen. She is our wonderful executive director. I'm going to put her email here in the chat there. Jerica would be happy to take those. We're always looking to expand our image library, so please make sure to reach out with that. Yes, Sandy, every single day. Come on, send it over. We want to hear about it and we want to share it too. And the last but not least for us, Mike talked about it last week. The link was not live, but it is live now. Check out the newest edition of the NACA magazine. As most of you know, it has gone virtual. And so I'm going to drop the link to that in there. I don't know if it's a protected link, but because of our Mimecast thing, but the link is in there. If not, you can find it on the website as well. But the newest edition is out. And then the next one is all going to be about Lost and Found, Return to Home, which we know a lot of people are super stoked about. on here. So if you have any great ideas for interviews or great ideas for articles, or you want to help contribute, email Jerica as well, because that next edition is going to be about lost and found. So we're really excited about that. But that's the update from NACA. Thanks, everybody.
Spencer, that's amazing. You made me think, though, that, NACA is one of our collaborating partners on the next challenge, the We Foster Challenge. And I wanted to ask everybody who's on the call, we have 17 collaborating partners, and if they would just put a reaction in their little square to let everybody know that they are participating as a collaborating partner, and hope that all of you participate. Applications are going to be open at the end of this month on the 28th. So if you don't know about it, we'll make sure that we put a link to the webpage. But just a shout out to all our collaborating partners, Michelson Found Animals and Cuddly, our funding partners as well. And we're just so grateful and appreciative of everyone joining in this challenge.
Hello, this is Jamie from the Human Animal Support Services Project. I just want to let everybody know that we have a couple new job alikes that have opened up, customer service and volunteer coordinators. Job alikes are just such a great way for networking, and they're getting a ton of momentum. So have your staff join those job alikes. I'm going to put the link in the chat. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's Lindsay from HSUS. We wanted to make you aware of a new training that we're doing in March on trauma-informed care. We know that that concept has been going around, and we really wanted to create something that would help folks with the foundations of what trauma-informed care looks like. So it's a two-part webinar, and I'll put the link in the chat, but it's a combination of folks who have some animal welfare experience, but also social workers who have been using trauma-informed care in their work for a long time. So the first session will be just foundations of what it is and how it can apply to your internal work with staff and volunteers. And then the second session will be about trauma-informed care and how you engage with your community. So I'll put all the info in the chat. We are going to record it, but we're not exactly sure how we'll use the recording in the future, if we will. And part of the reason for that is that the topic is really important to not just be available for a live presentation, but also that there may be concepts that come in there or questions that come up in the presentation that we may not want to share. So try to be there live if you can, and then stay tuned if we're able to release the recording.
Hello, also from Humane Society of the United States, I'm Krista Rakavan. I work on Animal Care Expo. So I just have a few Expo announcements. First one is that we're extending our advanced registration rate through March 7th. So I'll put a link to those in the chat. We are going to have a virtual track. We're going to be in Orlando, April 19th through 22nd, first in-person conference since 2019. So we have two scholarships available, and I want to tell you a little bit about those. They're both BIPOC scholarships. The first one is a virtual scholarship sponsored by Maddie's fund. And so we have 181 virtual scholarships to give away. I'll put the link in the chat. And then the second one is a BIPOC scholarship for just people in the Orlando area. And we're looking to introduce people to the field who are not already working or volunteering in it, to encourage them to consider the field as a career by bringing them to Expo. So I'll put that in the chat as well. If you know of anybody that would be eligible for this, please do share it. Thank you.
Hey everyone, it's Charlotte from Maddie's Fund. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are running a resource drive on Maddie's Pet Forum this month. It's an effort to help organizations prepare for the upcoming kitten season. So we're asking you to share any videos, handouts, files, foster pleas, anything related to caring for kittens and their mamas. We're also interested in learning what resources would be helpful. So even if you don't have a specific file to share, we'd love to hear what resources you wish you had so we can all work together to try and fill that need. I'll drop a link in the chat to the thread we'd like you to reply and attach anything to. Our forum team will organize them into the resource library, and also anyone who comments on the thread will be entered to win a $50 gift card just as a thank you for your time and your help. So I know I'm ready to have some foster kittens running around my office again, so we hope you'll help us get us all ready for some of the kitties that'll be coming our way.
I just needed to unmute really quickly and give a huge shout out to Charlotte, because for all of you that are using Maddie's Pet Forum and all the resources on there, Charlotte is one of the masterminds that keeps it organized and moving forward. So thank you to you, Charlotte.
Bobby, I have just a quick announcement about, since we tend to lose some people near the end of the call, I just want to announce a couple of upcoming topics on this call. Next week, we're going to be having veterinary social work as one of our topics, along with some legislative tools that you can use in your community. But next week we'll be kind of covering what veterinary social work is and how it has some lessons for our movement. We're also going to be talking the following week about a conversation that has been going on for a while, and for many of us is kind of hard to understand, which is this idea that particularly in the Northeast and parts of the Northwest, there's actually a shortage of available, particularly puppies, dogs for adoption. And so a couple of folks are going to be coming on the call to talk about what that means and sort of what ideas for solutions are. And it can be a controversial topic because for those of us working in places like California, Florida, and Texas, it's like, what? But we're really going to try to understand and think together about how we might solve for some of those problems. And then finally, we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks, actually, I think about 3 weeks from now, the topic of adopting animals that are bonded or that come into the shelter together. This is a real issue for animal shelters, and it's been tackled a number of ways, but there's a couple of groups that have data that shows that it may actually be faster to keep animals together and adopt them as a pair, which really flies in the face of a lot of what we think we know. And I know for me, it's one of the saddest things is having to separate a group, two animals that have lived together their whole lives and come into the shelter. And this data suggests we may not have to. So those are just a few of the topics we're going to be covering in the next few weeks. And as always, if you have suggestions for topics, please reach out to Bobby and I.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, I'll drop the link in the chat for y'all where y'all can submit those topics. But before we get to our final presentation, we do actually have a very exciting resource that we want to share with all of you. As we are reimagining the future of sheltering and wanting to be more community-centric, this means that we also need to reimagine what our facilities look like. So I'm going to toss it over to Katie Townsend from Animal Arts that's going to showcase a new buildings and facilities toolkit that was just released this week.
Hi everyone, I'm going to share the new awesome Role of the Facility webpage that is on the Human Animal Support Services website. So one of the things that we have created is the facility guideline, which you can download right over on this right side of the webpage. And it is a framework for what a community animal center is based on the Haas model. So really rethinking how the typical animal shelter could function and really focusing on the needs for the community. So it's a toolkit. It is a high-level framework. It does work for new construction as well as renovation projects, and we've kept it very inclusive to all scales of facilities. So even if you're, 10,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet, it still applies, and it goes through just all of the physical spaces that are associated with the community animal center. One of the other things we also have up here available for download is the existing facility analysis. So this is a lot of prompt questions and areas of the facility to help analyze your current spaces. What is working for you and what's not working? And then it relates back to that facility guideline to think better about some of those spaces, especially like utility spaces, storage spaces, disaster preparedness spaces, things like that. And then one more thing that we do have coming out, it's not released yet, but it will be shortly. It's 10 ways to renovate your shelter right now. So it's a list of easy and inexpensive changes you can make that really implement immediately and really can make some positive changes based on things that we're talking about in the larger Haas model. So I will put my email in the chat, please. If you, oh, somebody's already done it. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, we are the Building and Facilities Working Group for the HOS. So if you ever have other questions, you can always ping us there, or I'm regularly on these calls as well.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you so much for your leadership in that group. Kim just dropped a link in the chat. This past Monday, the Buildings Facility Working Group were actually on the call and gave a very in-depth presentation and overview of this toolkit. So if you are interested in learning more, please click that link to watch the presentation. And as always, you can reach out to Katie. All right, Kristen, back over to you for our final presentation.
Okay, so we're going to hear today from Lucy. Are you here? I'm looking for you on screen. Where are you?
Hello, I am here.
Hi, Lucy. So Lucy Fernandez runs our the Austin Pets Live Pass program, and we've told you a little bit about this. It's come up on a few of the calls. We wanted her to come talk about it today because the volume of animals that this program keeps out of the government shelter is astronomical. And we do have quite a lot of data on the program, and it's been run for about a decade. And Lucy is one of 2 employees who runs this program. If you're looking for a bang for your buck, if you're looking to truly impact your intake numbers in your community without having to break the bank, and you don't have a lot of staff resources, this program's critical. So we asked Lucy to come here and just talk a little bit about it. And this will be, given how much time we have, which is only about 15 minutes, you're probably going to have lots of questions. So we'll consider this kind of the beginning of the conversation. And as Lucy's talking, you can consider visiting the Austin Pets Live PASS program. PASS stands for Positive Alternatives to Shelter Surrender. It is on Facebook. It's a group. You can join it at any time and kind of learn from what they're doing. So Lucy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And thanks for everybody who's hanging in there and checking out what we have to say today about some all things PASS. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen and yeah, get started. Everybody can see that? Yeah. All right, perfect. All right, so I'm skipping ahead here. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about PASS. That's Positive Alternatives to Shelter Surrender, as Kristen mentioned. The mission is to provide resources and services to Texas residents who are experiencing challenges to keep their pets, with an overall goal of keeping pets out of the sheltering system and provide a safe, judgment-free zone for anyone in need. So while we are based out of Austin, we do kind of cover support for pets throughout all of Texas. They are we basically just only owned animals. Lost and Found, we partner with our local Lost and Found group to help with those folks. And then, obviously shelter and rescues have like their own thing, but these are particularly for owned animals and their humans that kind of need help. So up until last March, Patty was the one-woman wrecking crew for this program. She, manifested it out of thin air, started the PASS page actually out of her own personal Facebook page. And then that became too much. So then she went ahead and created the page. I think the link is in the chat now. And she also runs our adopt line. Up until last March, I was a cat adoption counselor with Austin Pets Alive. And then I wanted to go ahead and hop into the community support space. So that cat is actually the first one I ever got to name. His name was Moby from Ringworm. The reasons that people reach out: supported self-rehoming, fundraising for emergency vet costs, which does require admin approval. Myself and Patty will go ahead and screen people, making sure that the estimates were kind of giving them local, like low cost, affordable access for vet costs. We also help with temporary placement, behavioral training, and pet food supply. Our group, the community on Facebook is about 22,000 people strong. So on top of just me and Patty and our, experience and support, a lot of it is sort of self-governed. There's a lot of folks that want to help each other out. So, with behavioral training and things like that, that's been super helpful. And then, like I said, also the pet food supply and distribution. Let me know if I'm talking too fast, by the way, if I'm speeding through this. So how can PASS be reached? Like I said, there's the Facebook page. We currently are at 22.5, I think now. We gained probably about 1,000 followers or members a month at this point. So it's kind of been, you know, friend of a friend tells a friend of a friend and that kind of thing, which has been really great and organic. And then people can also email us at pass@austinpetsalive.org, and that goes to myself and Patty. And then we also have the Austin Pets Alive, the pass page on the APA website. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the pass page and kind of give y'all a little bit of the behind the scenes. If you haven't joined yet, you're welcome to. It'll automatically allow people in if they answer the membership questions and if they're within 100 miles of Austin. But we'll go ahead and I'll make sure the moderators know to let y'all in if you just want to go ahead and go in and take a peek if you're not in the area. So yeah, so this is the page. As you can see, there's just different folks that, you know, they need help with, you know, either placement for their animals, typically, you know, with rehoming. We also do fundraisers and things like that. This is Nala. We have guidelines that we have people, you know, using, always being courteous being one of them. There's a lot of biases, obviously, in judgment and to sort of things with rehoming. I understand it's a thorny subject, but we always want to help the animals regardless. And that sometimes means, you know, okay, put your biases aside. Let's help the people helping the animals. So Vicky's retiring and she's looking to rehome her little baby there. But thanks to some advice and support there, people are actually helping Vicky keep her pup. Yeah, so there's, you know, go ahead and hop on there, take a peek. It's a lot of fun. We also keep in files, different contracts and FAQ type files so folks can kind of self-serve themselves rather than, you know, needing to hold hands. We just kind of have the resources accessible for them.
So Lucy, let me just stop you for a second. There's a lot of
Please.
people that are on the phone and aren't able to see this. So
okay,
what PASS does is it puts all the questionnaires that people would need to use to safely rehome their own pet on there so that people can just pull those and then utilize those documents without having to bring the pet into the shelter, right?
Yes. Yeah. For sure. I've shared the link with y'all on this deck. So I'm sure with the recording, they can go ahead and put the full deck on there so folks can, you know, kind of check around for everything afterwards when they have time. Yeah. So again, supported self-rehoming, one of the biggest components that we help with. We also just updated the APA website so that now we have courtesy listings. So when folks do, you know, we partner with rehome.adoptapet.com. So when folks go ahead and add their pet to the website, using our unique code, every shelter and rescue that registers with Rehome gets a 5-digit code at the end. So when you go ahead and use that link, your pet can be put into, this is what our courtesy listings are. So these are some neighborhood local pets that, you know, don't have to enter the shelter and stuff. So so that folks can also look, okay, if we don't have it on, you know, on site at our, you know, at the APA facility, well then, you know, folks can go ahead and help Duffy out here or Pony or one or the other.
Lucy,
and then
somebody asked about the screening. So if somebody needs to fundraise for care for their pet on the page, what are you screening for?
So you know, people are always sort of wary about where their money goes to when they're trying to help, you know, people, their animals and things like that. You know, unfortunately, there are some bad seeds out there, but the vast majority of people are just trying to do what's best for, you know, their pets. So we'll go ahead and we'll ask for them to post the estimates. So we just want to make sure that they're posting the estimates, pics of their animals, just so we, you know, and then if they can call into the facility, the vet clinic where they're being treated, to go ahead and do phone-in donations. A lot of vet clinics do have like, you know, websites where people can go ahead and add, you know, $50 via PayPal to a certain animal's fund, those types of things. So we basically, you know, just go ahead and make sure, okay, all these things are met. If there is, you know, a you know, life or death emergency, it's very time sensitive. and said, we'll go ahead and make sure that they get to an ER vet and things like that. So, you know, and it depends on the location. Again, we do cover all of Texas. We do support all of Texas. So, you know, different locations in different areas kind of have different resources. So, so we have folks that reach out to us by email so that we can go ahead and triage and assist that way, so that we're able to assist with more critical cases, you know, a lot faster. I hope that kind of helps.
And I think that there's a question about the rehoming fee. And I know this isn't something we would necessarily recommend everybody do. I think it's within the comfort level of you all who run this, but PASS does recommend a rehoming fee like between $20 and $100. Is that correct?
Yeah, the $20 is the minimum, $100 cap or whatever. And that's really yeah, it's sort of just to, you know, sort of ensuring, I guess, like, you know, everybody has like this fear and this like the stigma of like the Craigslist bait dog and that kind of thing. So what we're trying to do is like, okay, we want to empower and trust the owners to make the best decisions. They can go ahead and waive that fee if they find a new home and an ideal next step for their pets, but just for the sake of the post and the page, that the rehoming fee is required. And again, it's at the discretion of the owner on how they feel comfortable. We just want to give them the resources and templates for that.
Right. And so that is not a recommendation that other folks necessarily need to follow. And certainly there's no evidence to show that charging a fee finds a better home, but there are some questions about that. And this page was started a decade ago, right? So it's been in existence for a while. And I think that it serves as a model to show the volume of animals that can be kept out. And Lucy, can you talk a little bit about the numbers that you all with just really two paid people are able to help every month?
Yeah. So actually, in the last slide here is our 2021 stats. So those are the kind of the volume and the numbers that of all we did last year. There's only over 10,000 emails that were answered. We raised over $23,000 for medical costs and over $2,000 for pet deposits. And that includes, there's individuals on there, anonymous angel donors. Our membership is pretty vast. So there's a lot of folks that are just, looking to help out anonymously and just, go ahead and help save animals. So we have amazing folks in there. There's different people who run foundations and things like that, that, just go ahead and help out when they can and when they're available to. The PASS program also, when needed and like with, sort of life or death cases and stuff, we can go ahead and get animals surrendered directly to APA. And then we also have, adopter to foster sort of triage so that the owner can end up being the foster, and then we help them adopt out to a new home, especially a lot of times with medical cases and things like that, where APA can intervene to save an animal and get them rehomed. We go ahead and do that. We've done over 140 individual community supply and food orders. And then we also have 8 different pet pantry partnerships. So when donations come funneling in for food and supplies, we go ahead and get them out and distributed to local pet pantries so that, they can be localized and accessible to different parts of the community. We fitted 3 pups with donated wheelchairs. Those are community pets. They were not just the APA internal wheelchair babies. And then we've had 4 dogs and 2 cats successfully being placed and reunited through the emergency boarding program. Actually behind me is a picture of Juniper. She was the first pup that I went ahead and launched the temp emergency boarding program with a partnership. Remington Pet Ranch generously took in Juniper, spoiled her rotten for a couple of months so that her mom can get back on her feet through some unfortunate circumstances. So yeah. So I just have her in the background as a reminder of, doing the things. And then, so those are the numbers. And then I just wanted to go ahead and cover some outreach and training. I know that it's kind of hard one of the pain points is like, how do we communicate that we have this available to our community, and how do people know about it? There's the PASS program page. We went ahead and post this on the APA website, and it's basically the full guide that I update every 4 to 6 months. and the resources. So food assistance, housing, utilities, and health, the affordable vet resources, behavior resources, things like that, so that folks can just kind of self-serve from there. Again, with Facebook not always being accessible for everyone, we try to get that out to folks.
Lucy, I think that the other thing I want to mention is if you're not doing supported self-rehoming, it's like the easiest thing. Everyone should be doing it, right? And now we have Rehome and Home to Home that can help. And I think they work, they're really compatible with this page, right? Like all of this can work together so that people start to rehome their own pets. And as you've shown me, that is more humane for the pet too, because a lot of times the old owner stays in communication, right, with the new owner.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that happen where, the village, it helps expand the village and support for that animal. So, the previous caretaker and then the new caretaker get to spoil the babies, just as much as they need to be, so.
We are out of time, and this is amazing. We will please join the PASS group if you haven't already. I saw we've had about 25 folks request to join, but there's no substitute for watching it, because if you don't have this in your community, you're missing out on a lot of what is actually happening to pets and people right now. It's a really hard time with people losing housing, and we're seeing a real increase in need. So Lucy, thank you. And thanks to everybody for being on the call. I won't be here next week. You will be here with Bobby. I will be home in freezing cold Ohio seeing my family, but back here the following week. And we have such exciting topics coming up. So please be sure to join us. And thanks everybody for being here today.
Rehome. My God.